All right, we're dealing today with the comparative texts, obviously, Ransom and the Queen. And I'll make some preliminary remarks by way of what you should be hoping to produce on the day of the exam. Many of these points, of course, your teacher will have pointed out anyway, so I'll only be reinforcing what your teacher said. But I'm hoping that I can also introduce a couple of points of comparison between the texts that maybe open up some new vistas for you to explore yourself. I would strongly advise that you go back to the VCAA Assessors Report from 2020 and look at the words that they wrote about the comparative, where they really stressed a couple of things. One was that no matter how people express it, you are seeking to persuade. So you are seeking to persuade the examiner or the assessor of a particular point of view. In other words, they're looking for an argument. They're also looking for very subtle and varied awareness of how the messages are conveyed in the two texts. Not simply, well, Ransom is a bit similar to the Queen in this way, and the Queen is a bit similar to the Ransom in that way. What they're looking for is compare and contrast. Yes, in some ways similar, however, no, in other ways quite different. And it's that subtle and varied awareness of how the texts differ in their approach, the whole thing to do with authorial intent, is absolutely critical to scoring a high mark for this part of the paper. So that's just the first fairly simplistic preliminary remarks I'd like to make about the texts. I'd also say, just in closing of those preliminary remarks, obviously these texts were never meant to be paired. David Malouf had no idea that one day his novel would be compared to the Queen. I'm sure Stephen Frears would be gobsmacked to hear that it was being paired with Ransom down under there in Australia. Nonetheless, there are points of comparison, but there are also significantly points of difference. And it's those that I hope to point up to you as the lecture goes on. I'm going to treat Ransom today as my anchor text. By that I mean I'm going to anchor a lot of my remarks in Ransom, but as I go along, I will then compare and contrast with the Queen as I go. When I say the Queen, I mean the Queen as text, not Queen Elizabeth, though at other times, if I actually mean Queen Elizabeth, I think I'll name her. Now, when I quote page references, I hope you have your book with you today, but if you don't, it doesn't matter. This is being recorded, so you'll be able to go back to check yourself. I will also name the page references as I go. I'll even say what part of the page the reference comes from, so hopefully you'll have no trouble following that. That comparison of the two texts will probably take up most of the first hour. My plan then in the second hour is to go through what I see as some of the key themes which could emerge in an examination question or examination prompt. And in the last half hour or so, actually plan out or sketch out the bare bones of what could be an essay prompt on the exam this year and how I would tackle it myself.